Hi, everyone. Welcome to another podcast episode with me, Lynn, and Dr. Jordan here. Today, we're going to be talking about astrology. This is one of the episodes that we have been wanting to talk about, wanting to create for, I feel like, a long time. And we're excited to dive into it. We're excited to dive into the connections to astrology, the roots of astrology, how to integrate it into our lives, and then also give you an understanding from an elemental and seasonal perspective on how to apply astrology to your life. And Jordan, my first question to you is what are your big three? What's your sun, your ascendant, and your moon sign?
Great question. So my sun sign is a Leo, my moon is Capricorn, and my ascending is Gemini. And before you actually go and answer yours, I obviously want to hear yours. I know that you're a little bit more in depth with astrology than I am. So I want to hear your perspective of what you define your ascending is, because I know that
Mm,
like sun and moon, for people who are a little bit in depth in astrology, it's pretty like obvious what those are. What is your
yeah.
ascending? What's the definition for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love astrology. It's seriously one of the best ways for me to understand like the world and how it works and the patterns of nature and um when you look at these different aspects like the big three, you have your sun, your moon, which is like your sun is how you shine, how you radiate your energy. Your moon is going to be that emotional energy, and of course you can share how you see these things too. And then when I look at the ascendant, for me it's like the mask that you put on every day that people see. It's like the outfit that you wear. It's the drag, you know? We're born naked and the rest is drag. Like so your ascendant, your rising is your drag that you wear. It's the persona that you put on, you know? And it's a lot of what people can see. It's, these vibes that you put out through, the way you style yourself and your personality. So to me, it's the mask that you wear, and how people perceive you. How about you? How do you understand
Yeah.
the ascendant?
A little bit different than you, but I mean that's the great stuff about this. There is no right answer. For this,
Mm-hmm.
the sun for me has always been like your consciousness. Like it's your most like up forward, like your day to day personality type and things along those lines. Similar to the
Mm-hmm.
sun being very straightforward in that sense. And so the opposite of that with the moon, I've always seen as like your subconscious, who you are when you're by yourself, who you are like in your own personal time and things along those lines. And the ascending is
Mm-hmm.
like I said, that's the reason why I asked this question. I don't really have a good answer to that because one time I was told, and like there might be some validity to this, but I was told it was called the ascending because it's like what this life purpose that you're currently on is meant to like embody. Like that's your goal. Like your end
Mm-hmm.
goal is to become that fully through this lifetime. So it actually doesn't necessarily contradict anything you just said, but that's kind of the perspective I've seen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we can interpret astrology in all these different ways, and it has been interpreted throughout history and in different cultures in many ways, right? I've heard the same thing. I've heard something similar where like you embody your ascendant in order to kind of like get to your life purpose. And what I've also heard is you embody your ascendant to start to radiate your sun sign because your sun is like also a big part of how you're supposed to shine and radiate and to live day to day. So yeah, I've heard very similar things, and I feel like
It's almost like you're saying the ascendant, it's like the language you communicate your sun sign through, like it's what brings it
mm,
out. I, I've never
yeah.
heard that explanation, but I really, really like that.
And how does that apply to you, like being a Gemini rising and Leo sun? Like, do you feel like that
Yeah, so
Gemini
I
rising
think
helps
that's a
that?
perfect question. And I will say that, you know, the Leo aspects of myself are something that I'm just now really starting to reclaim because I feel like the Leo aspects of myself, the being outgoing, the being center stage, the being the confident person that Leos usually tend to have. I feel like I was that in my teens and my younger years. Then life just kind of took those pieces away from me for different reasons. So I feel like I'm just now learning how to become a Leo again, which is awesome, especially through a platform like this. And I think I do see it communicated through this Gemini lens, and that's why I'm an enigma to a lot of people. Is that Gemini is being seen? People usually see Gemini as being two-faced or double-sided or things along those lines, and I think that that's a huge misconception. Where it's more so that Gemini has the capacity and the ability to understand and see all angles of things. So therefore, it seems like they're on both ends of things. And just no, they have no side at all. They can just perceive everyone's opinion towards things. So how does this help me communicate my sun sign? I feel like I'm better able to express my Leoness, and have people be reminded that that's not the only part of me. That's just like that's the face I'm giving you to present the rest of me. And I think that that's how
Mm,
I've met Gemini to kind of open that. And last but
yeah.
not least, the Gemini trait is also portrayed as just kind of being all over the place, for lack of a better word. And I think that that's something that other people have a hard time remembering, that we are these multidimensional people and we can have interest in so many different areas. And I do have interest in medicine, obviously. I have interest in art. I have interest in dance. I have interest in doing things like this. But I show up to all those different things almost as a Leo, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense in resonance.
Totally. So it's like it's it adds to how you're supposed to shine, like your sun sign. It's almost like your path to embodying the Leo, the full Leo-ness. I love that. And I also love you speaking into that the sun is speaking into the conscious and our sort of our identity. And to me, I like talking about like the ways in which it shows up like energetically, because I feel like the sun is going to when you think about the sun, it's going to like shine on everything. It's going to shine and radiate and nourish like plants and animals and things. Like it doesn't have any sort of discrimination on what it shines on. It will just shine. And I think when we are fully like when we're embodying our sun sign, that's how it feels like, is like when we can be in that higher expression of that sign. I think that's really how it feels like when it is in your sun sign. Um, and then with the moon being connected to your subconscious, I love that too. That's not often talked about, but I do really feel like your moon is like these deepest parts of you. It's like it's the yin, right? It's the deeper yin that we often don't get in contact with most people unless you are in more of a closer relationship or intimate space with that person. But I love that. Do you feel like your moon sign like causes a change or like impacts the way you do express this Leoness?
No, and I think that I'm very lucky with my moon and my sun, because I feel like they represent the archetypes so well that helps me understand them better, because my sun sign
Hmm.
is literally represented by the sun. Leo is its ruling planet is the sun. So it's so easy
Yes.
for me to conceptualize that then, because it actually is the sun. And then I feel like my Capricorn has very moony like qualities, if you will, because Capricorns are kind of seen as being this animal that is like two pieces, basically. Capricorns are known to kind of go into the depths, to kind of go deep, to kind of understand things at a level that most people don't even want to scratch. And so I think that my moon sign in that has definitely like taken full effect. And it being in a moon placement, again, I feel like that even strengthens that. My subconscious goes very, very, very deep, because not only is it my moon sign, but also that I have a moon sign that likes to go there. And I
Mm.
think that it has this very much so as above, so below principle that makes me so appreciative of my signs, because I can go so deep with my Capricornianness, if you will, that I think it allows me to be shining that much brighter and that much higher in my Leoness, because when I am by myself in my own personal time, I am able to like recharge from those depths. And then when I am with people and on the outside world, I'm even able to shine that much brighter. So I'm really grateful for the dynamic of my big three, because I feel like they just work and they just fit. Again, they're mine, so of course it's gonna feel that way. But I definitely do feel so, and I think that this is a perfect segue into you discussing your big three because there's quite a few coincidences there.
Yeah, it's so crazy. When I first found out how similar our big threes were, I was like, there's no coincidence. Like, there's no coincidence that I met you. And actually, recently, I found out that one of my clients, like one of my close clients that I have, who has been so amazing, she has the exact same birthday as me as well. Like Capricorn. So my big three, this is where I talk about my big three. I have a Leo sun, Capricorn rising, Capricorn moon. And so we both have that Leo sun, Cap moon in common, but the only major difference is the Capricorn rising, and you have a Gemini rising. And I actually really feel there's so many times where I'm like, Jordan gets it. You get it. Like, you get the going into the depths, you get like going into your own inner sanctuary. And I feel like that's really what Capricorns do, is like their inner world is like such a deep place, such a sanctuary. When you think about the opposite sign, Cancer, they are known to like make their home their sanctuary. But I feel like for a Capricorn, their like deep inner world, their like fantasy world inside is their sanctuary. And I totally feel that for myself, where I'm like, with my Capricorn moon, I can go so deeply there. And I love that you bring up that the mountain goat, which is the symbol for Capricorn, was traditionally a sea goat that was connected to land but had this other part of its body connected to the water. So it has this like very earthy yet connected to like the depths of water and intuition and mystery and dreaminess to it. And I think that's something that I feel often. And I'm very connected to like the dreams that I have, and just my intuition comes very easily. Keep in mind that I have a lot of like a lot of Capricorn in my first house, which we can talk more about that too. And then my Leo sun, which, I think for me as well, it took me a lot of time to embody Leo. And I don't think I feel like I embody Leo as much as I did when I was a kid. And I think that comes with like peeling layers and, coming back into what does it mean to like embody my inner child, which Leo totally is. It's like embracing our heart, embracing our inner child. But I also feel like a walking enigma because I have that Capricorn rising, which presents me as this, very disciplined, very structured, very dreamy esque, um, an ambitious like person, which I totally am. That is such a big part of me. And at the same time, I have this aspect of like wanting to just like create all the time and wanting to express and wanting to help people. I think Leos are oftentimes known to be like this creative center stage energy, but I also feel like it's the energy of the heart. It's the energy of like wanting to help people, wanting to connect, having this genuinity, having this big heart that wants to help people. And that's always been a big part of why I do what I do, is I want to help people. I want to be of service. I want to support, I think that's a big part of how my Leo shines in the world. And definitely I can see how my Capricorn rising supports that. It's like all of the hard work ethic that I have and the ambition I have is literally fuels my ability to like help people and radiate that out into the world. And also now that's transitioning as well into this work ethic, this drive that I have is going into creative projects and, expressing and just creating art just for art's sake. It's like that to me is giving me life in a new way that I'm embodying the Leo. And I'm curious to know for you, Jordan, like, do you feel like you touched on this a little bit, but different aspects of your life where you did embody this Leo? and the expression of Leo, do you feel like now it's changing for you in terms of, because I know we're both in healthcare and we're here to be of service and share our gifts and things, but a lot of what we've talked about is like expressing ourselves creatively, using our voice, like putting it out there. And it reminds me of like maybe there was something that happened in the Leo energy before that made us hide our light or made us kind of like close down these aspects of ourselves that maybe didn't feel safe enough to create. Um, I'm curious, how has that changed for you?
Yeah, no, I think that something that you touched base on that I think that needs to be pointed out is I think that the Leo energy does have a sort of youthfulness to it. So obviously,
Mhm.
as we reach the deep old age of 30, there's some youthfulness that is lost. So I think that that's playing a minor role in the overall perception of that. But I also think too is, and this is going to be the most Leo statement I'm probably ever going to make, but I also think that Leos get of all the zodiac signs, I feel like Gemini's, Scorpios, and then Leos usually get the shit, if you will. Like, oh, Leos are so egotistical, Leos are so obsessed with themselves, etc., etc.
Right.
And so I think there's also a minor part of that of me thinking that like this is a negative quality, that this is a bad thing, that shining is actually inappropriate. So I think that's
Mm,
another aspect of why some of that has been cut off is just because it was seen as a part of us that like we shouldn't express that strongly to begin with. And I think that this is a perfect segue into just better understanding astrology as a whole. And I think we can kind of go through the signs very vaguely in that I would like to kind of give some ground and basis to those who don't understand astrology or might be trying to conceptualize in a logical way how this might be applicable and might be real. And the first thing I like to take, because I like to think biochemically about everything and very logically about everything, we'll propose a theory that I've actually never said to you, and I want to know how it vibes and resonates. So we often hear when someone brings up astrology, how does where the planets position affect the way you act or the way you look or the way you do anything? And at first to that question, I was always like, man, great question. I don't have an answer to that. But more recently, I've kind of developed actually a decent answer to that. And it's that we always know that like the full moon, depending on where it is in its position to other objects, can cause increase in tides, can cause increase in seismic activity. We know if the sun shoots off flares, it impacts the EMF into certain areas. We know if Mars actually becomes between us and the planet itself and the sun, it can kind of mess the EMFs coming from the sun and do all sorts of things, yada, yada, yada. So I got to thinking that who's to say that when we are positioned in the constellation of Leo, that there aren't some subtle, whether they be gravitational forces or energetic forces, whatever they might be, that influence the genetic makeup of a developing embryo, that therefore they then embody and become exactly what that thing is based on the position we are in space at that time. These
mm.
subtle forces can affect us at a genetic level, so therefore you embody somewhat what that is at that time. Has it something that's ever like has that deep of a thought ever crossed your mind, or at least adjacent aspects to that?
Totally. And the word that I'm thinking of is neutrinos. Are you familiar with neutrinos? Neutrinos is like, yeah, neutrinos is like this. I think it's a term that comes from quantum physics, and that,
It feels very quantum physicky to me.
yes. But basically, it's a unit of information, energetic information that is like encapsulated in a point of time and space, and it's very much along the lines of saying if you're born at this time, this date, then all of the energetic influences of the planets and the EMFs that they're releasing and the different chemicals that they're releasing and their light that's affecting the earth, all of those are creating sort of like an energetic imprint that then is stored in the embryo and kind of creates the biological makeup of this baby in many ways, this energetic biological makeup. um
I understand what you're saying, and like I think this brings us to the point of like there's so many aspects of woo stuff that seems metaphysical at some point that has then become physics. No longer
Mhm.
metaphysics, it's physics at this point. And of course, we're speaking of things that are very hypothetical still, but at least there's
Mhm.
a theory and there's a way to make that connection. And of course, we aren't physicists, so we might not be utilizing these terminologies appropriately in the way that they should be, but we at least
Mhm.
get the basic gist of what's kind of going on and going through there. And I
Yeah.
think that this is also, I'm sorry, before I finish, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot about what we learned in Chinese medicine and also this idea of so above, so below. Like the ancient origins of astrology and just even understanding how the planets have influence to life here on Earth is the ancients back then, the ancestors of astrology were able to calculate, okay, if this is where Venus is right now, and maybe this is where these are certain events that are happening in the world or maybe in our town or in our community, maybe there's some sort of connection there, and it was all through correlation. Like, okay, this is happening, this is where Mars is, this is what, maybe Mars and the sun are conjunct this day. Okay, let's try to relate and see what's happening in our own environment, and maybe there's some correlation here. And after many many years of documentation and of just observing nature, they were able to kind of see, okay, based off of the planets and nature's patterns, this is how we can then apply it to um, different things of our life. Like it created these energetic forms and shapes and imprints and vibrations almost. And I think in many ways, it doesn't excuse human behavior. I want to make sure that when we talk about astrology, it's not to put people in a box. It's not to talk about the pop culture stereotypes and the things that, the Scorpio's known for or for Libra's known for. It's not just those things, but it's also talking about energetically how things create patterns in nature and in, through the planets. So it's important that we note that, like, when we are talking about astrology, we're talking about how energy moves, similar to Chinese medicine. We're talking about how yin and yang move in the body, how qi and blood are interacting. And so it's very similar to us. It's like when the sun is in, let's say, Virgo, how does that then shift our energy towards our relationships, into nature, into our loved ones, into our work? It's very much speaking into we're actually experiencing all of these energies. My mentor in astrology, I studied with an evolutionary astrologer, and he said, we're actually everything, every sign we're experiencing through an action. Like, instead of I'm a Capricorn, you can say I'm Capricorning. Instead of I'm an Aries, I'm Aries ing, like you are in the action of it. You're in a dynamic relationship with these energies.
So I think that's, you couldn't have set this up more better for the next segue I wanted to take then. And it's that another explanation. And again, I'm not trying to prove to anyone that astrology works. I mean, if you're here at this point, and you're probably not going to just change your mind based off the words I'm saying, but I do like some information that can help people conceptualize, or who are almost there that need a little extra push, because I'm that person that needs logic to apply to almost everything. And so I was
Mm.
also thinking about psychologically, like, how could this play out? How could this actually work out? Let's say that there is no metaphysics. Let's say there is no pattern recognition. Let's say that this is completely a psychological model. Would this still make sense? And I think the answer is yes. And I think that the psychological model that I would utilize is that we have a very, very strong association from birth over the time that we were born. We celebrate that birthday every single year. We have this association that you are this date, you kind of are this embodiment of this time of year. And if we look at the zodiac signs and their attributes, they all correlate to their time of the year. They're an expression of what's going on at that time.
Mhm.
So from a young age, we're attributing that time of year to who we are. So maybe we embody those traits. And I think it would be nice to like quickly go through I mean by that and kind of bounce back and forth with
Yeah.
you about how these times of the year are their traits. So let's start with Aries, just because it is believed to be the beginning of zodiac. And actually, before we even go to this, I want to once again say we're talking about Western tropical zodiac in this for the most part. Now, of course, there's so many different interpretations of astrology, and I don't think any of them actually contradict themselves. I think that they are just all expressing things with different terminology. But again, we'll start with Aries, which is the beginning of springtime. And how would you, I'll let you take this one first. How would you say Aries personality types represent that time of the year, the beginning of spring?
Such a good question. And I love this because I love looking at nature and what nature's doing during this time. When you think about springtime, it's like after winter, after hibernation, after chi and energy is like going more inwards, it gets to a point of like, okay, chi and energy and animals and nature is ready to kind of come up again, ready to bloom and um, right, like spring from these places of conservation. And so when we are having spring, there's a lot more, I want to say yang energy. There's a lot more like energy that's getting excited and increasing, and you can feel it. Like you can feel when, if you have lived in the northern hemisphere and have had experienced a springtime in any part, you start to notice like there's more birds that are chirping, there's the plants are coming back. And if you're into gardening, like you start to see that your seeds that you've planted are beginning to sprout, right? You get this like uplift of energy that's happening. And it's interesting too, because when you think of like a seed that's planted and it's sprouting, sometimes sprouts can break through concrete. Like imagine how much like life force energy that you need to break concrete. Like a plant, a small plant has enough atmospheric pressure to do that. So there is this intensity to Aries as well. There's this like motivation, this initiation to kind of break through and to create something. So when I think of Aries, I think of this energy of spring. I think of this, you know, uh, this want to like begin something and initiate something. Oftentimes, Aries is connected to the archetypes of the pioneers, of the leaders, of the people who are very headstrong, head first, and they're motivators. And I think that energy is really encapsulated in the very first season of the year, which is spring. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's true. This animal that are represented by a ram just really pushing on through
uh-huh.
the representation visually there. And I think that
Yeah.
leads very nicely into Taurus also being a horned animal because, again, I think it's continuing to push through with that energy. And I think the nuance with Taurus, it's a little bit different. Whereas we said Aries is more this like initiator, this thing that pushes through. Taurus is a little bit more about like putting roots down and like being more homesteady-ish, I feel. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's where the second phase of spring kind of goes into is, all right, once the stuff has blossomed, has pushed, has gotten to this place, we then need to make sure we are being resourceful with what's coming up. And I think that that's where Taurus shines, is this resourcefulness, this homebody-ish, this good food and good times type of vibe and energy. So I think this shows how closely these two things are correlated, that this Aries energy then turns into this Taurian energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that encapsulates that. I don't think I need to explain that any further.
Yeah.
And then we move into Gemini energy, which, again, this is late spring now. We're about to go transition into summer. How do you feel that this Gemini energy that represents that time of the year? Because this isn't one I've actually thought about too much.
Yeah. I think likewise, like I haven't, it's something about Gemini, it feels like it has this more airy quality to it. Yeah, it's like kind of more difficult to grasp. But I do want to note before we move on is that each one of these signs have a correlating planet. So, for example, Aries is connected to Mars and the energetic symbolism of Mars, which is like going forth, conflict, war, but also just like having this drive and motivation to create things. So, it's a very fiery energy. And then Taurus also has a connection to Venus, and Venus is also symbolizing creating beauty. Like Taurus, like if you ever meet anyone with a lot of strong Taurus energy, like they love to craft and build beauty around them in their spaces and even on their bodies, and like they're so very much connected to sensuality in that way, which is very much a Venus thing. And then when we go into Gemini, Gemini is connected to the planet Mercury, and Mercury is symbolic of um, the energy of like communication, connection, like transaction. And I feel like Gemini, in some ways, has this energy of there's a transition happening, going from springtime to summer. There's this shift that's happening that feels a little bit more not as grounded, not as like earthy as Taurus. It feels a little bit more like, okay, you're uprooting a little bit and something is shifting, something is happening. And they actually call they you can associate each one of these signs to their energy types, which is either cardinal, which is Aries, then you have a fixed, which is very much rooted, that Taurus energy, and then you have more of a mutable energy that's shifting, adjustable. It could be channeled in many ways, which is very much like Gemini energy. And I think that's what's happening during this time of the year. There's a lot of shifting. There's a lot of like in between. It's not yet that full-blown summertime energy where people are like out and about, and it's the summer vibes. It's not that yet. There's an in between. I'm curious to know what you think, as you're a Gemini rising.
Yeah, bringing up Mercury, and I know Mercury being kind of like the messenger, the communicator, and things along those lines. The Gemini
Mm,
time of year, so we have like May 22nd to about June 21st, so right before summer. It is a very communicative time. It's a time when we're like making plans for the summer. We're making plans for what we're going to do and how we're going to express and experience this. And it also feels
mhm.
like a very elusive time. You can lose track of time around that time of year, the time of the year that we're
Yeah.
personally in right now. So I think
Yeah.
that that expresses why we are having such a hard time grasping it, because by definition, that's what this time of the year is, which is representative of Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a perfect move into what this elusiveness then turns into. It turns into something a little bit more concrete when we enter that threshold into summer. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I know that Cancer is represented by the moon, and Cancer somewhat has a somewhat of a mom energy, and I don't mean mom energy of like this soft mom energy, this in this light la la mom energy, but like this like really like maternal holding energy. And I think that the way we see this in this time of year, in the beginning of summer, is that summer is often seen as a time when we really do reconnect with family, with friends. We create these connections again. We're constantly doing cookouts and hanging out and celebrating the time of year. So I feel like the Cancer energy of that time of year, of the beginning of summer, is seen in our connections to family in that regard. How else would you
Mm-hmm.
elaborate on?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that when you think about the signs in a medical astrology perspective, I just made this connection right now. But Cancer is going to represent the center of the body, like the chest, the stomach, oftentimes like the breast. And when you go even one more layer deeper to that, you get to the heart and you get to the spine, and which is very much like Leo. So you can even follow the astrological signs and their energy just like looking at the body. Like Aries is the head, Taurus is the neck. You have Gemini very much being like the skin, right? Kind of this more elusive part of the body. And then you have Cancer, which to me, yes, Cancer is connected to the moon. It's very much connected to um, our emotional energy. And I almost feel like during this time of the year, it's like this buildup of, okay, you went through the Gemini, you went through maybe a little bit of transition, maybe there's some uprooting, and then you go into this cardinal energy of Cancer, which is very much like a push. Like there's a push of energy that feels, in some ways, it's like it gets you into, I can't really describe that. Like it's like, okay, summer is here, and maybe the plans that you made are starting to happen, or you're preparing for them, and you're taking action on them, maybe in some ways. And I feel like Cancer is very much connected to this push forward energy. Like if you embody Cancer energy, you have this ability to like very much hold a boundary and very much like express like, okay, this thing, like you want this thing or you don't want this thing, like a boundary. And it almost feels like an assertive energy to me, like being able to kind of assert yourself.
Trust me, the cancers I'm thinking of all kind of have that. And wait, the
Yeah,
cancers I know that have that don't realize they have it either. It's just like such a natural, like,
totally.
and it's just so effortless. And again, it's this maternal type energy where
Yes.
when we think of mother as like the protector and guardian, though, like more
Yes, the
so of
mama
like
bear.
the mama bear, to say the least.
Yes.
And I think that I'm so happy you brought up the body parts associated with each sign, because I wasn't sure about Gemini and Cancer body part wise, but it's interesting that you're saying skin, chest, like these types of areas. When this is the time of year, people are taking off layers of clothing. They're expressing and showing these parts of their body. So it
Mm,
kind of fits again well with the times and the associations with the two. So
yeah.
especially if you're living in a place that's very cyclical and seasonable. So it makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense there. And that
Yeah.
being said, before I go into our territory, anything else about Cancer before moving forward?
Yeah, as I'm thinking about Cancer and it ruling the stomach, and it makes me think of like us coming back to a place of grounding, because I think during that transition period of Gemini, it can be a little bit like, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be a little ungrounding during this time, with like a lot of maybe transitions, a lot of like connecting, communicating. That kind of gets a little bit, can get a lot. So I think
Or
Cancer is very much
realizing, oh
coming.
my gosh, I just signed up for 30 things this summer and I have all this stuff to do now, and it gets it gets to be a lot.
As said by a true Gemini rising. Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I think the Cancer kind of brings you back into, well, can I come back to my center? Can I come back into what feels right for me? And like holding true to that, holding true to my boundary. I think that's a good place for Cancer.
Appreciate that aspect. So, from moving from Cancer, moving from water, moving from this space into Leo, which is
Mhm.
about halfway through the summer mark, it is a time of the year that it's either hot girl summer, or like it's all about being very
Yes.
showy, doing things, experiencing things, having all the fun that you possibly can. Really speaking to the heart's desires this time of the year, with Leo being associated with the heart. And I think that that's why, Leo has this perception of also having to go to perform, to like be, because this time of the year is a lot about that. So I think I see a lot of burnout in Leos because they do have this aspect and these qualities. However, I do think it's the beauty of the time of the year, just being very expressive and very outgoing and being very experiential. So beyond that, and then also it being represented by the sun, I mean, of course, this time is represented by the sun because it's the middle of summer, the highest peak of the sun itself. So, therefore, again,
Mhm.
it represents all of these qualities that we can see throughout those times of the year. Is there anything further that I'm missing from these Leo qualities?
I mean, there's so much I can say on Leo, but I think the central part of this is that this is where the sun is at its highest peak. Usually you have like the summer solstice, kind of maybe like the tail end of Leo going into Virgo, but Leo is very much where like yang energy, like chi is at our highest peak. and maybe our projects during this time are at our highest peak, or and maybe we're, having that summer fling, and like our relationships are reaching a peak, or it's representing this point of time where energy hits its like climax, and then you know it begins to go through the fall, which transitions us to Virgo.
Yeah, I think one last piece that I didn't reiterate, but you said earlier on that I forget. And summertime is very much like a childlike energy, And again, Leo being
Hmm.
associated with youth in those times of the year. I mean, when you think of childhood, of all your greatest memories, at least for me, you think of like peak summer. You think of these things, and this is the time of the year that you associate with youth and childhood. So I
Yeah.
think that was a perfect transition as well, because Virgo having this earth-based energy and being a little less energetic than this peak of summer and being on the tail end of summer, it makes me think because what's to come after summer is fall, is a time that we need to plan and prepare for winter. I feel like Virgo kind of encapsulates some of those ideals of starting this planning process, starting this preparatory phase. I feel like they have a little more practicality in that. I actually am
Hmm.
not that familiar with Virgo attributes, so I want to know if there's anything else about this time of the year that Virgo really encapsulates.
I love Virgo. Like, there's something about Virgo that I've just learned to, I think it's maybe just my partner is a Virgo, and I've learned so much about Virgo energy and have had such appreciation for it, because Virgo again is an air element. So it's, when you think of it in similarity to Gemini, it has this more elusive quality to it, but also it's an earth sign, so it's a little bit more grounded, you know? And so, like, during this time of mutability, like there's a lot of transition, there's a lot of connection, there's a lot of like making plans for the rest of the year. I also want to say that Virgo has this ability to be a little bit more discerning as well, because I think in summertime our energy is just so like abundant that we're saying like yes to every event, we're going to all the festivals and we want to do all the things. But then when we go more into Virgo, it's a transition into fall. It's a transition into, okay, energy slowing down. Nature itself is beginning to kind of bring and pull its energy back and conserve a little bit. And maybe the leaves are changing colors. Maybe there's definitely a transitionary energy to this time of the year. Um,
Like all the music and lore about this time of year. It's like this can't be summer love. It's like you look at all the things and you're like, all right, that was just me being super high and peaked and happy, but now let's be really like legit with this. Was this just
it's
something I was doing in the fling and the fun of things, or are these actual practical things and relationships and stuff that I made during this time?
it's the reality check. It's the come down. Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like Virgo is this energy of of okay, let's get back down to earth. Like, and when you think about it connecting to the body, it's connected to the digestive system, the intestines. And so when you think about that, like it's it's digesting things. It's kind of harvesting. Virgo is related to the harvest. It's kind of taking some of the lessons that you've learned through the summer. Maybe the relationship didn't work out. Maybe, you had some big revelations about things that you actually, ways you want to use your energy. You take those lessons and you're going to bring them into the rest of this year. And I think that's a good transition into Libra.
Absolutely. Again, I think the overarching word that I heard from you is just practicality of Virgo, and I think that the
Hmm.
Virgos that do have that practicality aspect of them, if nothing else. So,
My
um,
goodness, yes.
so Libra
My
is
partner is
one.
so like that. Like, he's always like, how can we bring this back down to earth? How can we create, one thing I do love about Virgo energy too is like they like efficiency. They like systematic ways of like doing things. Like, how can we move energy in a very effective way? Because I think in that summertime energy kind of goes, it's so abundant. It goes out all different directions. But Virgo's like, how can we direct this energy in a way that feels good and makes the most sense?
Well, and again, just for one last thing to speak to the time of the year as well, that time of year is all about doing that in general. With if we look back historically, like agriculturally speaking, it's taking the
Mm-hmm.
crops, the harvest, the things that we were able to bring into life during this time of the year, and then divvy it up, utilize it correctly. And again, this is a great transition into Libra, with Libra
Mm-hmm.
being about balance and finding balance in all its forms. The reason why this time of the year is so representative is because if we don't do our checks and balances during this time of the year that is Libra, that is late September, early October, mid October, you're going to be screwed once winter comes if you don't do these checks and balances because we're preparing for what's to come. And I think that really represents the air quality of Libra, the balance quality of Libra, and the time of year
Mm-hmm.
that it's under.
Yeah, when I think about it, it makes me feel like Virgo is, especially because it's a mutable sign, it's preparing us for the next phase. Like
Mm.
Gemini is preparing us for the next phase. So Virgo, and then also the symbol of Virgo is the Virgin, which is like coming back into yourself, coming back into this independence, your true sovereignty, your true energy. And so by us being prepared and coming back to our true self, it brings us into Libra, which is like, can I come into balance as my true self with everything else around me? Because it's moving out of the Ariesness of me into the we, and how do I gel? How do I connect? How do I, fit in with like the environment and the community? Like, what am I here to contribute? How do I balance myself with that? And I think Libra is very much that energy of like balance, and also like filtering out, because it's connected to the kidneys as well. How do I filter out like what doesn't serve me and still kind of keep in my true self and the things that do feel good, right? Like finding this, what you're saying, the checks and balance of the time is super important. And then that's very much like in that fall energy. Like it's so much about like nature itself is losing leaves, and like energy and like on
And,
earth is like coming
and
more into itself.
and
Yeah.
conservation, therefore, I mean, that's the reason why they're losing leaves to save energy, to conserve. And it's funny,
Yes.
TCM wise, it's the purpose of the kidneys too, is to conserve energy. So you can see that
Mm.
represented in both of those systems. And I think that before I continue my train of thought, did you have anything more Libra-esque to
No,
look?
I feel good. I feel
Cool.
balanced
So then
around
we move
Libra.
into, spooky time of year, my favorite. So end of October into November. And we have this time marked by almost every civilization ever studied of death. We have,
Mm.
in the Mexico region, we have Day of the Dead. We have here in the States, we have Halloween. We have in European region, Samhain. We have so many representations of death and what that means. And I think it's just because obviously we're seeing out in nature everything dying, so of course we're gonna reflect that internally. But I also think that's what makes the Scorpion attributes is they are this thing, death, that is unavoidable, but is so elusive, so mysterious. No one really knows what's beyond that veil. And it's kind of the Scorpionic characteristic. There's some depths of mystery there that's like, what are you? Who are you? Like, I can't understand you. And my husband and I had the same big three about our difference is our moons. And he's a Scorpio moon. And that's how I
Mm.
understand Scorpionic energy is there's sometimes I'm just like, what is going down there? And I don't know if anyone's ever gonna know the answer to that, So I feel like it's a very Scorpionic characteristic, which is characteristic of the time of year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's this depth to it. There's this mysterious element to it. And I feel like during this time, you could feel it if you're somebody that's pretty sensitive to energy. It's like you feel the veil is thinner during this time of year. Like you feel like that the unseen is just a little bit more tangible in some ways. But at the same time, it still has this like elusive quality to it. And Scorpio is known to have like this this depth where like when you think of the ocean and you go into the very deepest parts of the ocean, it's dark. And maybe there's like animals here and there's fish here that like, have odd shapes and colors and lights, like things that are unseen morph in this darkness and are not often talked about. So it's like the Scorpio-ness reminds me of this time where maybe things are being exposed, like things are being exposed and brought into light. And there's also this element of like transformation and transmutation of this time. Like maybe we learn about something during this point of the year where we're like, oh, that's going to shift a lot for me and maybe going into the next year. There's always like things that kind of come up during these points of time. And then also I want to say in nature, bringing it back into what like trees and plants are doing. um, let's just say the leaves are falling from the last season, or well, from the last phase of fall. Those leaves are going to break down, compost, and it's going to bring more nutrients into the earth for this tree to regenerate itself. So Scorpio is connected to regeneration. It's connected to like continuing the cycle of life and death, because we need to have these times of like releasing to make space for the new, which I think the next will prepare us for.
Well,
Yeah.
and saying it's transformative and regenerative, we also have to, especially considering the year that we're in now, it's also election time of year. So I think that that's,
Mm.
the energy of that time of the year. We are, deciding our future fate. We're deciding how we get through winter, what's going to be on the other side, what's going to be in our future by digesting and processing what's going on now. And we kind of need
Mm-hmm.
to do that by going into the depths and analyzing that. And one other
Mm-hmm.
aspect I want to definitely bring up as well is Scorpio's close association with sex as well. It's an aspect that's not as often talked about, but still very primary. And this is a
Yeah.
frank the time of the year. It's like it's cuddle season. It's like cuff up season. It's whatever your words you want to use, which is
Yes.
closely associated with intimacy. So I think that that's another way that this is expressed and seen during this year, and that's why sex and death have this weird balance, because sex is rebirth, death is the death thereof. So they do have this
Mm-hmm.
contrast and this ebb and flow there. So I think this year, time of year, more than any actually I've discovered, it's so clear the symbolism of the time of the year and the attributes that are seen with Scorpio there, on
Mm-hmm.
all aspects of that. And I think that's
Yeah.
darn cool, honestly.
Yeah, and I do want to say and add on to that like the planets that rule and traditionally rule Scorpio is Mars, which is the planet of like also sex, but conflict and like having your truth come up, and just speaking your truth and being like very upfront about it. And then Pluto, which is this planet of like transformation and rebirth and breaking down things that don't need to be there anymore in order to create space and energy for the next phase, which is Sagittarius.
Which is one that I have not thought about this time of year at all, which is crazy to me because it's
Mm.
obviously Christmas, which is something I celebrate, but there's so many major holidays around this time of the year. And I think that that's what I'm going to kind of lean into too, because if this time of the year has so much ceremonial based practice, I feel like there has to be
Mhm.
some attributes to that that are associated with Sagittarius, because this is the time of the year, obviously, where winter is not only coming, but it's almost here now. So I feel like there's so
Mhm.
much ceremony surrounding that, almost as like a Hail Mary to get through the winter, you know? And is there
Yeah.
any attributes of Sagittarius that fall in line with that? Because it's, again, another one I'm not that familiar with.
This energy, the first thing I thought about was people's instinct to check travel. Like,
Mm,
because Sagittarius is very much known to be connected to expansion and the
mm,
energy of like connecting to cultures and foreign cultures. It's very much like the arrow. When I think about Sagittarius, I think about the goddess Artemis and her arrow, her bow and arrow, where she's like aiming for something and redirecting her energy towards what she wants to create for this next year. And I think maybe that's not the energy of like goal setting, and redirecting your energy is not so explicit during this time of the year, except when we get to, let's just say, like the end, right? Like December, the last week of December going into January because of the new year and New Year's resolutions. But I think during this time, it's very much either about reconnecting to like what expands you, what your truth is, and maybe that could be friends and family. Maybe that could be through traveling, going to see and be inspired by other cultures. Um, and maybe that's just like doing what sparks and makes you happy. Because I feel like during this time of the year, people just want to relax and be happy and like enjoy their life. I feel like that's also that Sagittarius energy, the fire energy that just like, just enjoy, just kind of be in, you know, be in the flow of life and the truth of life and the reality of what it is, which during this time is very much about family and friends and reconnecting. I also want to say there is an energy of like abundance here. And think about these times. It's like the abundance of friends and family. And usually people take more time off during this time. So there's like more of abundance of time. And yeah, it just feels like it could be, I think also in the Western culture, it's more of a time of commercialism and you're buying a lot of things and it could be overdone, right? Because it has that an energy to that. But yeah, people are experiencing more of this expansion of time,
Yeah, and I
energy,
think the most
resources.
typical version of that time of the year and how it's kind of been hijacked, if you will, is it's been turned from being a time of expansion, a time of recognizing all that you have and being appreciative, to just buying a bunch of shit and
Yeah,
losing focus on those things, you know? And I
right.
think that the perfect example now that I even asked you the question that embodies the time of the year and another archetype that we can utilize is, of course, I always have to, in my brain always has to like attach to pop culture to understand. And I see
Hmm.
Katniss Everdeen as like the Sagittarius. And now
Yeah.
that I'm thinking about that and intuiting it, it makes a lot of sense too, because she was all about taking care of her family, making sure they had what they needed, making sure that she lived in abundance, even though she had very limited resources, but she found a way to utilize those resources to make the most of what she had. And it's a very,
Hmm.
telling time of those times is the end of the year when winter is coming. We have to do what we can with what we have to survive what's to
Mm-hmm.
come. And so I feel like Sagittarius has this grit, has this demeanor of being able to provide because they have no other option to, which I see in the few Sagittarius in my life. I totally see that.
Yeah, for sure. I see it too. Definitely. Yeah. And also to say this is a mutable sign as well. So it's going to again prepare us for this next phase of the year, which is for Capricorn.
Which is
Yeah.
another one that we've already touched base on a bit with us both having it as our moon and you as your moon and rising. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this time of the year is very Capricornian, especially in the West when we view things as January beginning, the beginning of the year, which isn't true for most Asian cultures, which isn't true for even tropical zodiac, but it's still how we utilize the time of the year that January 1st is the beginning. So therefore, this is a
Mm-hmm.
very, very practical time. This is a time for planning. This is a time for contemplating. It's a time for figuring out what our future is going to hold. And then we look when we go back a little bit further in history. It's also the beginning of winter where you have more time to contemplate because you're indoors, you're preserving, you're reserving. And so I feel like that's a very Capricorn energy is to sit with yourself and figure things out. And I think that that's
Hmm.
what the time of the year reflects through and through. Where else do you expand upon that?
Yeah, thinking about the Gregorian calendar, which says that the beginning of the new year is January 1st, and during this time we are in Capricorn season. There's oftentimes, the New Year's resolutions or like goal setting for the year. But what I've learned and what I feel in my body now is aligning that more with the beginning of the astrological year, which is very much Aries season. Because I feel like Capricorn is this time of hibernation, right? It's this time of like really going in, being connected to the practicality, being connected to the earthly things that you have to create and do, and the accomplishments that you want to have, but then also being connected to the visions and the dreamlike mystery and being connected to both of those worlds. And I think during this time it's really great for that because we're more indoors, we're more inwards, I also feel like I don't know, maybe it's just me as a Capricorn rising and moon. Like I always feel so much pressure during this time. Like I feel so much like maybe it's like the societal pressure to like do and be something you want to create. That also feels like very much Capricorn energy.
Pressure.
But we also want to remember that like Capricorn is a yin sign. It's not a yang sign. And it's also a feminine sign. So like it is very much about coming back to yourself, not like expending your energy going outwards, which I feel like, Capricorn energy has been known for, but it's very much about coming back, being being really in this energy of what do I want to create? How do I want that to be done? What kind of plans do I need to create in order for that to happen for the rest of this year, or for the beginning of Aries. It's very much a time of planning, just like what you said. And I do want to say that it's connected to the parts of our body that are the deepest, like our bones, our our deepest aspects of ourselves. So like it has this air too of connecting to our ancestry, our generations, because Capricorn has that. And I also want to say, can't believe we're forgetting this, but it's connected to Saturn. It's connected to this.
Bring them up.
Yeah. It's like, how can we be more disciplined with ourselves and how can we come back to the reality? But also, be more inwards about it. Maybe connect with like stories that inspire us, yeah. What do you have to say on that?
Kind of expand on something you already stated. I tell people all the time that, especially based off the Chinese medicine times of year and things along those lines, that this is a terrible time to execute, to plan, to do. It's not a doing time of the year by definition of the seasonality of it. So
Hmm.
as great as it actually is for New Year's resolution, I think it's a great time for contemplating those resolutions, for thinking about what you want to do, for trying to plan and coordinate and sit with it. But again, I think these Aries time of the year is the time for actual execution, for doing, for executing all of those things that we have kind of set out to do. So I think we definitely misuse this time of year. And I think that having that understanding can take the pressure off you, because I think that with that pressure, only thing that's going to result in is burnout later down the road, because this is supposed to be a
Right.
time of rest and relaxation. And if you're not getting that, you're not going to be able to spring once spring comes. So I
Yes.
think that's a perfect wrap up for the Capricornian season. And to get us into the last two, the Aquarian and Pisces seasons, which are again two that I'm not that familiar with, and two that I have not really sat with or contemplated much. So the Aquarius being middle winter basically here. And if we look at the time of the year of middle winter, it's a time that's like historically something that some people didn't make it through. Some people didn't survive. It was a time where they got really cold and people died off just due to lack of resources. So I kind of just answered my own question, but I'm going to have you expand. It actually explains then why Aquarian has this characteristic to it. Aquarius is the water barrier. It's the communal sign. It's a sign of helping others. And I think that might explain that time of year, because
Mm,
if you didn't have community, if you didn't have help from others, you might not make it through this time of year. So I think that's a
yeah,
beautiful representation of how that time of year does correlate to Aquarius.
that's beautiful. I never thought about it like that, but it makes so much sense that it is this communal sign. It is the water bearer. It is, helping others with resources and things. It's like, yeah, that makes so much sense because during this time, when you think about what's happening in nature, things are barren. We're in wintertime. The leaves have lost their the trees have lost their leaves. Like, if you think about what's happening underneath the soil, like the networks and mycelium, like the roots of the trees, I'm sure are exchanging nutrients and like trying to help each other, in different areas. Maybe the certain areas don't get enough nutrients or water or sun. Like I feel like nature is always helping each other and trying to harmonize in its own ecosystem. So I feel like Aries Aquarius has that energy to it as well. I love that. And thinking about its connection to to the body, it's connected to the circulatory system. And the circulatory system is so much about, providing nutrients to where it needs to go. and doing that exchange in many different areas as well. And
And
so
it's
I love that.
absolutely you need that circulation to stay warm as well. So it's a very wow,
Mm,
that's beautiful how that all connects. And then Aquarian
yeah,
being this air sign. What planets are associated with Aquarius? I don't think I know off the top of my head.
Saturn.
Saturn as well.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then,
And that
Saturn too is definitely connected to this energy of like a stark reality, like,
mm,
needing to be really have boundaries and no limits. And, I think during this time we can kind of face those things. It's like where we get to the peak of winter and we're like, I'm ready. I'm done. Like I want the sun. I'm ready to like, you know, just feel a different feel something different, feel some heat. I feel like that Aquarius can have that energy. Yeah.
And then as we move into the last, which is Pisces, which now if we're on the time wheel, we're at the end of February, middle of March type of time of year. And this is another one that I have not, A, it's something I have very little knowledge on, and B, it's not something that I've contemplated too much. But obviously we're nearing the end of winter. Hopefully hope is coming back at some point, especially if you live in a place like I do. And it's a time of year that is a little bit elusive, because again, we are at another transition time of year where we're going into another. My and I'm gonna be completely throw my bias on the table right now, and hopefully no Pisces that I know are going to be offended by this. But the only thing I know about Pisces, honestly, is they just make me sad. Like I just want to be sad when I think of Pisces, and like I wish there was something else I had associated with it, but all I get is sadness. And so hopefully you can unravel why maybe I feel that way, and B maybe an association with this time of year.
Well, Aries, I mean, not Aries. For some reason, Aries wants to keep coming up. Pisces is connected to the planet Neptune. And Neptune
Mhm.
is connected to dreams, it's connected to emotions, it's connected to
Mhm.
illusions. So I feel like oftentimes Pisces can be, that Pisces energy is like so deep in their emotions. It's so deep into like fantasy worlds, and like maybe sometimes their reality is not is somewhere far away from their fantasy world, and their fantasy world is actually where they're happy. So oftentimes a lot of Pisces that I know are connected to like multiple worlds at one time. And I know this because I have some Pisces in my chart, and over the years I've had like a lot of time to think about and feel into Pisces, like because it's also this very elusive energy to it. It's a mutable sign. It's a time of transition as well, but it is very much connected to all these different worlds, and sometimes the reality is more difficult than being in another reality, than being in a fantasy world, you know?
You helped answer my question then with this Neptunian energy, this older consciousness, different states of mind, and things along those lines. That explains
Yeah.
that time of year because when we're coming out of winter, it is almost like this fever dream. It's like, was that just
Mhm.
real? What am I going into? Where is time? Where am I? What is going on?
Yeah.
It's February 20th to March, man. It's a weird time where it almost
Yeah.
feels timeless, and sometimes in the bad way, it feels timeless, especially if you're in upstate New York. And so I kind of see that then with this Piscean energy being very imaginative. Because again, we're still in winter, which again, winter is about contemplation. It's about going into the
Mhm.
depths and about further understanding things. So I can kind of see that those full circle connections here, and maybe that's why my understandings of what it is to be Piscean is a little bit skewed.
I do want to say too, with Pisces energy, after Aquarius, with that strong influence with Saturn, you have Pisces, which is now ruled by Neptune, and all Pisces wants to do, all that energy wants to just dissolve the boundaries. It wants to like kind of break down all of like the and soften, like all these structures that we created for ourselves. So sometimes it could feel a little chaotic. Sometimes it could feel very overwhelming, like so much energy in all of these different places. And it's hard to grasp anything that's like feels solid and like grounding during this time. So I think there is a tendency to kind of lean deeper into depression during this time and to be stuck in our emotions because there's this, you know, our inner structures kind of dissolve. So I feel like it's connected to this very elusive nature of breaking down,
Yeah,
maybe things
yeah.
that didn't serve us.
That's a great way to kind of poise this because Capricorn and the Aquarian times energies, all you will, you said they're both ruled by Saturn. And so they are
Hmm.
both very structured, very holding you in an energetic holding take and making you sit with stuff. And so I feel like
Yep.
that Piscean energy obviously is needed because we're about to enter into Aries where things are going to bloom, things are going to come out. So you kind of need some dissolution of these structures. And I think that that's where I
Yeah.
see Piscean being sadness to me. It's that I see the Piscean state as being, once again, really sitting with things that I personally don't want to sit with because nobody wants to sit with their sadness, of course. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's why it kind of comes up that way is because this is an energy of kind of almost it feels scorpionic in a little bit of a ways of kind of
Hmm.
going to some death, disillusioning some things, and kind of preparing us for that next step.
Yeah, and they're both water signs. Like Scorpio's a water sign and then Pisces is a water sign. So they that water is not going to it's going to cause erosion of earth. It's going to cause erosion of boundaries. It's going to make things a little bit more elusive and hard to grasp. So, yeah, it's definitely it's watery for sure. Pisces is an interesting one. And it's also opposite to Virgo, which Virgo is very much about practicality, boundaries, like let's create a system. Pisces is the opposite. It's like, it's kind of chaotic.
Understandably so. And I feel like we just did such a beautiful job of encapsulating that. There's, of course, so many different dovetails that we could have gone on for each sign that just
Yeah.
couldn't be grasped, obviously, in this time period. So I kind of like, not that we ended on a heavy note, but I think we should lighten up real quick and then kind of wrap up. And so by
Yeah.
lightening up, put you on the hot seat. And let's take this very lightly, not too seriously at all. I want to give you the when I give you a person's name, I want you to tell me what sign you think of and why, and it does not have to be a long explanation. So I'm going to
Let's
start
do it.
off with I hate that I'm feeding into this, but I'm going to start off with Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh, I feel like she is a Libra.
I can see
And
where you're thinking that.
yeah, I don't know. I just feel like she has this energy to her. I don't know why. It just something tells me she's a Libra.
Okay, so she is actually a Sagittarius, and that being
Ah,
said,
oh,
I can see that like cutthroatish, like she might be like but she'll and has some of that fiery energy if the need be. So I can see
okay.
that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Um, and then we're gonna go into RuPaul.
Oh my gosh, I feel like he's a Scorpio. I know this for sure.
He's a Scorpio. Yep.
He's a Scorpio. It's so interesting because I feel like he has such a deep inner world. And also,
Mm,
I can see his Scorpio-ness and all his passion, like the way he dresses and all of like the different phases of life that he's been in, like so much transformation, so much rebirth, so much passion in his art and being in drag. It's like, yeah, totally a Scorpio. I see it.
in the soul association, and I'm not trying to belittle all of what he does into one thing, but there's also some sexuality, sex involved in him, and that's a very scorpionic
Mm,
characteristic. So,
totally.
absolutely. Next, I have Elon Musk. This one surprised me, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of a
Ooh.
hint.
I don't know, Taurus or Aquarius?
So, Taurus in my bones is a little bit closer based off what the answer is. He's a Cancer, which
Oh, interesting.
I know I feel very little associations. The only thing I might be able to make sense of there is, and of course we're limiting people their sun sign, and we know there's so much more to them. But I think there might be that aspect of you know forging through that very like mother. You know how we said the pioneering mother and the very
Yeah.
aggressive aspect of that, for lack of a better word. I can kind of see
Mhm.
that. But other than that, that one was kind of
This makes me think of the tarot, the chariot, the card, the chariot, because it's most connected to Cancer. And if you think about a chariot, yeah, if you think about the chariot, it's like it's going to push forward. It's going to push forward this like strong energy behind it to like create something or protect something or, initiate something into the world. So I could see that.
no, absolutely. And then next I have for you, Albert Einstein.
Oh, Whew. No, maybe an Aries or a Gemini. I,
This one
I'm
also very
guessing.
surprising.
Yeah.
He's gonna haunt me too. Pisces, because I just shit on them. But I
Okay.
guess again, I think that this actually encapsulates Pisces now that you explain it to me, because people think of Albert Einstein as this very logical thinker, but I think he was anything but. I think he was very much
Hmm.
so in other worlds, in other dimensions, in this very elusive space, and that's how he was able to come up with these things.
Yeah, and I do feel like all of the signs are going to like kind of trickle a little bit into each other. Like they're all dynamic. We're talking about dynamic energy that's always moving. So I feel like I can see why he's a Pisces because he's so creative. He's in these other worlds, but he's taking some of that Aquarian energy of innovation and genius and like breaking, breaking, the norms. I could
And
see it.
even there, you got some of these Aries energy to like initiate and start some new concepts that probably haven't been accepted at those times. So,
That. Yes.
absolutely. And then we're gonna actually let's go with one more fun. SpongeBob SquarePants.
Let's,
This one
oh
actually
my
makes sense. Actually, this one actually makes sense. So
God. I feel like SpongeBob is, oh my gosh, a Gemini?
here's your hint. He's like a people pleaser. He's always trying to make others happy. Like
Libra?
Libra. He's a
Oh,
Libra. Yeah.
that was my favorite. Wow, yeah, that's
Uh,
amazing.
All
I
right,
love
we're gonna
that.
go one last place and wrap this up. So I'm gonna have to go here. So our presidential candidate. So Joe Biden. What's your guess?
Ooh, Aries? No, maybe not.
Scorpio. Scorpio.
Oh,
Which
interesting.
I'm not gonna get too far into this to limit myself here, but it's interesting with a lot of the things surrounding him that his representation would be scorpionic. Because
Mhm.
that makes you think, to say the least.
That's so interesting. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. This
Yeah.
next one I probably would guess because of certain reasons, but what would you guess that Trump is then?
Leo.
Right? He feels very Leo-esque. No,
Yeah.
Gemini, which I can
Okay.
also I can see the Gemini
I
this
guess
because there is.
I think he has like a Leo rising or something because I remember reading about his chart, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
No, it's very very interesting. And that was really fun. I again,
Yeah, that was
we
great.
kind of wanted to encapsulate in this two things that we just completely violated, but it was fun. So here we are. The two things that we really wanted to encapsulate with this episode were, the archetypes that we're expressing and these very limited perceptions of each of these signs is just a way to conceptualize them. Each of these 12 signs are representations of a greater whole, and they each represent a piece of our overall personality type. So to be a whole person, we actually should encapsulate and represent all 12 of these signs. And I think that's also something important to remember. So when we look at these exaggerated characteristics or archetypes, they're just better to understand the energy that they hold and the thing that they
Mhm,
represent. So
mhm.
after leaving you with that, what is one thing you would sign off with that could be a way to utilize this information to kind of better your life or to integrate or to help in some way?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it goes along the lines of what you just spoke about, which is each person embodies the energy, this energy, these energies in their own shape, form, because we're all human, we're all multidimensional, we have so many facets to ourselves. So one Libra is going to maybe express itself differently from another one. It's because we hold all of them within ourselves. We just hold different, levels and ways. And we're also being influenced by, our generations and our ancestral wisdom and our culture and society. So we're each going to hold it differently. And so for me, how I have personally used astrology and how I recommend it, you know, you listening on the other side of this, integrating into your life is begin to have fun with it. Begin to use it as something that is supportive at helping you understand like yourself first and foremost, because I think that's really why it was built, was to understand our persona, to understand our own purpose on this planet. And so using it in those fun ways of like experimenting with, okay, maybe if I have, sun in Virgo in this house, then how does that express already in the things that I'm doing? And sort of using it in this way to understand yourself even better, to kind of help you validate yourself, and then also having open conversations with your friends and your family about it. And that's, for me, has been the funnest thing. It's just using it in this way to deepen yourself, deepen information about yourself and your relationships with other people. And then I'm just going to say a side note, I love using um flower remedies. This is like such a big part of what I love using on a daily basis for myself. So I actually have different flower essences for each astrological sign and their energies and what they need help in terms of balancing with. So using, let's just say, vervain, which is a flower remedy for Leo, it's amazing at helping to balance the heart, to balance anxiety and emotions. So I use that quite often, honestly, for balancing my Leo energy and that fire. And, we can definitely talk more about herbology in another episode, but these are my ways of using astrology. How about you, Jordan?
Yeah, so I have so many places I could take this, but I'm going to kind of keep things simple and kind of wrap up what we already discussed here today. I think how we went
Hmm.
through the seasons and the things that these things represented and the times of year they represent, I think that that's the easiest way to start subtly and very effectively and very
Hmm.
profoundly incorporating astrology is that when we enter and shift into a new time of the year, so where we're recording this right now is in Gemini. So when we entered into Gemini, which was very recently, I thought to myself, what aspects of Gemini am I expressing? What aspects of Gemini am I experiencing right now? And how can I find
Mm.
the good aspects, the higher expression aspects, and embody them more? And how can I kind of let go of the things that are negative Gemini aspects and not express those? So I feel like as you go through the calendar year and as we enter into different signs, I think reflecting on what that sign represents and how you embody it is a super easy way to not only learn astrology, not only to learn better about yourself, but also to really live in seasonality, to live in harmony with the land and with our cyclical nature. Because I think at the end of the day, that's something that both me and you are very passionate about, and something that's been lost so much is that every single culture and society before us lived in cycle, lived in the way of the lands and what was
Mhm.
going on externally at those times. And I think that this is a great, trivial, and fun way to reincorporate that and start doing that again.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Learning how you embody them and how it feels like tapping into, what am I feeling as this time of year is Gemini? What am I feeling during this Leo season? Like really being self-reflective, holding some sort of safe space for yourself in order to explore those feelings is, yeah, amazing.
Absolutely. And I can't believe we spent this much time on this subject, and we feel like I even feel like we scratched the surface of things that we could have talked about.
Barely scratch the surface.
And as we say several times, this will probably be only one of many talks we have on this specific topic, but I think we did a good job this time around.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you everyone that tuned in with us today. It is our pleasure to be here and to share this wisdom with you. We will catch you on the next episode.